Statements by ministries. The Minister of Children and Youth Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize October as Child Abuse Prevention Month here in Ontario and to help draw attention to the annual Purple Ribbon campaign. This campaign encourages everyone to learn the signs of child abuse and neglect and reminds us that we all have a duty, a legal duty, to report any cases that we know or suspect. I want to take a moment to thank the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies that are joining us here today. I know Christina Campbell is here with us. Thank you for being here. To the Toronto Child Abuse Prevention Committee for the work you do raising awareness. And I also like to recognize the Child Welfare Political Action Committee who are joining us here at the Legislature today. I also want to thank the members in the House today who are joining me in bringing awareness to a cause by dressing in purple or wearing a purple ribbon. And a special thanks to my colleague Lou Rinaldi, who last Thursday, the member from North Cumberland, Quinte West, introduced a private member's bill that we hope will lead to Ontario formally recognizing October as Child Abuse Prevention Month. We believe every child deserves a safe, loving, and nurturing home. Sadly, not all children have one. To everyone gathered in the House today, and to everyone here in the province, please hear this. If you suspect a child is being abused or neglected, you must report it immediately to a Children's Aid Society. You don't have to be sure that a child is or may be in the need of protection to make a report to a Children's Aid Society. You only need reasonable grounds for your suspicion. We often talk in generalities about something as troubling as child abuse, or we use symbols like purple ribbons to represent it, but sometimes, Mr. Speaker, it's necessary to describe exactly what it means when we talk about abuse, even though it's very difficult to hear. Because in order to report it, we need to recognize abuse and the signs of abuse. Child abuse knows no boundaries. It can take many forms. It can be physical, it can be emotional, it could be sexual. Physical abuse includes deliberate physical force or actions by a parent or caregiver which results or could result in harm to a child. That can include bruising, cutting, punching, slapping, shaking, burning, biting, or throwing a child. Using a belt, stick, or other objects to punish a child and that can cause serious harm is also considered abuse here in Ontario. There's emotional abuse. It's a pattern of behavior that attacks a child's emotional development and sense of self-worth. It can also include belittling, insulting, rejecting, ignoring, and isolating a child. It may also include exposure to domestic violence. Sexual abuse occurs when a child is used for sexual gratification of an adult or an older child. And finally, abuse can take the form of neglect. The failure to provide a child with the basic needs such as food, sleep, shelter, safety, clothing, or medical treatment. It may also include leaving a child alone without providing the child for care and custody. Recent figures collected by UNICEF and the World Health Organizations are quite distressing. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 13 men report of having been sexually abused as a child. 1/4 of all adults having been physically abused as children, and almost 1 billion children on this planet are subject to physical punishment on a regular basis. Children in Ontario are not exempt from these troubling statistics. Every year, children aid societies across the province receive many reports of alleged abuse and neglect. Mr. Speaker, back in 2003, there were 43,000 cases of child abuse here in Ontario. This sobering reality is what drives our government to be there for children and the need for protection. As part of the Child Abuse Prevention Month, I'm calling on neighbours, colleagues, coaches, friends, and professionals working with children to be vigilant and to report any reasonable suspicion you may have to a Children's Aid Society. We're also providing all MPPs with material for their constituency offices. These materials should be already on their way to your offices. I encourage you to post them, to distribute them to members of your community. Members of the public, including professionals who work with children and youth, can call their local Children's Aid Society 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and can report it in privacy. They can also visit Children's Aid and Youth website at ontario.ca Stop Child Abuse for more information. I'll repeat that one more time. Ontario.ca/Stop Child Abuse for more information. We also continue to fund the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies to train child protection staff so they can respond quickly to reports of suspected child abuse or neglect. I want to thank all of our Children's Aid Societies and Indigenous Wellbeing Societies here in Ontario. I want to thank their board members, managers, and their compassionate staff, including the hard-working members who have joined us here today, who work to serve the 14,000 children and youth here in Ontario who are in need of protection. Thank you for making a huge difference in the lives of these children at risk. Like Children's Aid Societies, our government is committed to improving the lives of all young people in the province, including those receiving services from a Children's Aid Society. Over the years, we've made many improvements to our child welfare system. Fewer children, Mr. Speaker, are coming into care. Many are being adopted into permanent homes. Youth leaving care have more support in their transition towards adulthood, including counselling and financial support, to help them stay in school, to complete post-secondary education, and to become better prepared for adulthood. We've increased the accountability and transparency of the Ontario Children's Aid Societies to publicly report on performance indicators every year. Last July, we released the Safe and Caring Place for Children and Youth, our new blueprint for building a system of licensed residential care here in the province. The blueprint is a multi-year plan for comprehensive reform to improve the quality of care and enhance the oversight of services. It ensures that children and youth have a voice while in care. And Mr. Speaker, yesterday I had the opportunity to join the Minister of Education, Mitzi Hunter, as we announced new supports for youth in care to help them succeed in schools. We were in Hamilton. Earlier this year, we took on what is perhaps the most comprehensive step of all by passing the Child, Youth and Family Service Act. This act provides a modern framework to strengthen the quality and oversight of a wide range of services. Funded, licensed, or delivered by the ministry, including child welfare and licensed residential services. When children are in care, they should feel safe. The places where they live should be welcoming and should meet their needs. And young people should have a say in the planning of their care. That is why this new legislation that was passed on June 1st builds on the goals of Caitlin's principle by putting children at the centre of decision-making. It focuses on the voice, the opinions, the goals of children and youth themselves, not just the issues they face. While these reforms are a big step forward, we know that there's so much more work to do to improve the lives of vulnerable children and youth here in Ontario. It takes partnership and commitment and an open ear to children and youth and families who use child welfare services. Our first priority is to support families in the home to prevent abuse or neglect from happening in the first place. That is why we're strengthening the focus on early intervention to prevent children and families from reaching crisis situations at home. It is crucial since children and youth who leave home with nowhere to go are often left vulnerable to abuse. Mr. Speaker, as a father, as an uncle, as a father of two young girls, I'm especially troubled by the fact that many young girls here in Ontario end up being sexually exploited and used for sex trafficking. There's a common misconception that sex trafficking involves girls and women not from Ontario, but is predominantly a homegrown problem affecting vulnerable girls right here in Ontario. These are girls as young as 14. We need to remember that sex trafficking is a form of child abuse. By raising the age of protection from 16 to 18, the new legislation extends access to child protection services to all 16 and 17-year-olds, so that youth in need of protection can access services to help them successfully transition into adulthood. The goal of this policy includes reducing homelessness and better helping victims of human trafficking. The new legislation also clears that systemic racism must continue to be addressed. We know that Black children and youth are overrepresented in the child welfare system, and this is one of the reasons why my ministry is supporting the implementation of the One Vision, One Voice practice framework in the Children's Aid Societies across the province. This framework was co-developed by the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies with leaders from the African Canadian community to support culturally appropriate service delivery for African Canadian children, youth, and their families. Indigenous children and youth are also overrepresented in the child welfare system. To help prevent crisis situations from arising, situations that often land children in care, we've launched the Family Wellbeing Program to provide culturally appropriate support. Indigenous child well-being societies play an important role in delivering culturally appropriate services to families in their communities. By investing in Indigenous well-being societies, children and youth receive child welfare services, remain connected to their families, to their communities, and to their culture. My ministry will also be requiring that Children's Aid Societies here in Ontario collect identity-based data to provide aggregated reports to us in the near future. With better information, we'll have a deeper understanding of children, youth, and families receiving services. This will make a more inclusive, more culturally appropriate Ontario. Mr. Speaker, we know that we need to do better, and we need to continue to provide the support for young people here in Ontario and to provide better support for our Children's Aid Societies. And that's why we're implementing the Child Protection Information Network, which modernizes and replaces the legacy information systems used by Children's Aid Societies. The province's database will enhance child safety by providing societies with the capacity to consistently track youth and their outcomes, young and children, as well as the ability to seamlessly transfer critical case history information across societies. Mr. Speaker, we want to make sure that young people are set up for success here in the province of Ontario. We want to make sure that our Children's Aid Societies have the best, most modern legislation that is in place to ensure that they can reach that goal. And we want to make sure that we continuously bring those numbers down so we have less kids in care in Ontario. I just want to thank everyone here in the House for everything they do, and we know this is never a partisan issue. It should never be a partisan issue. I just want to thank all members in the House for the work they do every day to protect our most valuable asset here in the province, our children. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Statements by ministries.